Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Birth Mother Matters in Adoption podcast with Kelly Rourke, where we delve into the issues of adoption from every angle of the adoption triad. Kelly is the executive director, president, and co-founder of Building Arizona Families Adoption Agency in Phoenix, Arizona, the Donna K. Evans Foundation, and the You Before Me campaign. She has a bachelor's degree in family studies and human development and a master's degree in education with an emphasis in school counseling. She was adopted when she was 3 days old. She was born to a teen birth mother, raised in a closed adoption, and reunited with her birth mother in 2007. Our goal with the Birth Mother Matters in Adoption podcast is to spread awareness and education about the beautiful choice that is adoption.
So in today's episode, we're going to focus on adoption matches in domestic adoption. We're going to talk about what it looks like for an adoptive family and what it looks like for a birth mother. So let's go ahead and start with adoptive families, what it looks like and what preparation goes into an adoption match. So when you join an adoption agency or sign up with an adoption agency, at that point, after you have filled out your application and if there's any registration fees, you're often asked questions about what type of a birth mother and what type of an adoption you're interested in. What is the best fit you feel will work for your family? Sometimes with our agency, you'll be given a preference sheet. You know, in that preference sheet, there'll be questions about, are you open to open adoption? What type of communication between you and the birth family you're interested in and you're willing to accommodate? You will also see questions about, are there certain things like drug use that you are open to? Maybe you're open to certain types of drug use. Maybe you're open to drug use that was done prior to the birth mother finding out that she was pregnant. Or are you open to alcohol use? Are you open to alcohol use? Maybe she didn't know she was pregnant and had drank prior to knowing. Maybe she is continuing to drink during her pregnancy. So there's lots of questions, and it's really, really important to answer these questions honestly, because we're going to talk later about what happens when you are presented to a birth mother and you change your mind after she's picked you. So we're going to talk about that later.
Now, another thing, I think you really need to examine yourself as an adoptive family and look at, okay, what are my deal breakers? Because the more deal breakers you have that you're like, no, I won't accept this, I won't accept that, the more of those you have, the harder it is to get that match that you're looking for. So really examine yourself and say, this I can live with, this I cannot, and narrow it down as much as you can.
I 100% agree. When I talk with adoptive families about their match preferences, I talk with them and I say, okay, let's start with the main goal. The main goal is to become a family, to become a parent. So that's at the top. Now, in order to get there, you want to have as many doors open as possible. Every time you close a door, you are potentially delaying the ability to become matched. So you really want to examine, what is really important to me. At the end of the day, what works for our family, what does not work for our family. And the other thing too is you want to make sure that both you and your husband are both on board with these decisions. There has to be a united agreement here, because sometimes, and again, like I said, we're going to talk about this in a minute, you'll have somebody that's so anxious, so ready to become like a mom. And this woman may be like, okay, I'm going to accept everything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just want to be a mom. I just want to be a mom. I just want to be a mom. And then maybe the husband is also very much wanting to be a dad and be a parent, but he may not be okay with certain things. The other thing is that people are always worried about saying, well, race is an issue for us. Maybe they are a Hispanic race and they want to stay within the Hispanic race in terms of adoption. And so again, this is where you need to be really honest about, number one, what you're comfortable with. Number two, what are deal breakers for you?
And that doesn't mean to not have any deal breakers, because you got to remember, you're looking at an entire lifetime or 18 years plus of, okay, this is going to be my life. So you really need to look honestly at it and say, I am willing to accept this, or I am not willing to accept that.
Right. Because if you say that you're open to an open relationship. And, in that, maybe you're choosing semi-open. So letters and pictures and communication prior to the baby being born, after the baby is born and after the adoption is finalized. And you have agreed to letters and pictures every 3 months until the baby's 18. On year 4, when you're like, yeah, I'm not comfortable doing this anymore. Well, that's not what you agreed to. And that's not fair because, again, a birth mother placed her baby with you under these premises. And,
sure,
post-adoption communication agreements are enforceable in many, many states. And so when you are making these decisions and it's, again, prior to match, you need to really do some soul searching about what you're going to be comfortable with long-term. In our program, and again, I can only speak to our program, we have a match coordinator. We have somebody that looks at the adoptive family preferences and the birth mother preferences. And there's like an algorithm where she will match them appropriately and then present the profiles to a birth mother. So she'll look and she'll say, okay, these 5 adoptive families, I'm just throwing a number out there, are all of their preferences match what this birth mother is wanting. And she'll take those profiles and then we will present to the birth mother. The birth mother then goes through them and chooses from those families. I will say that sometimes when you just start, and maybe it's the first profile, you know what I mean? The first, because adoptive families are given non-identifying information for this birth mother before they are presented, and they say, is this a good fit for you? Would you like to be presented? I have seen adoptive families then change their preferences after seeing the profile. And again,
Really?
There's not pictures or anything. Yes, sometimes hearing it and seeing it kind of, you're like, okay, maybe I'm not as open as I thought I was, or maybe certain drugs are more of a deal breaker for me than I initially thought. It kind of makes it a reality, and that's okay. What's not okay is when an adoptive family says, okay, I read the information on the birth mother. Yes, I want to be presented. Yes, I'm good with everything in this profile. And then a birth mother chooses them. And then after being chosen, they're like, yeah, you know what? I thought about that and I'm not okay with that. So that's not going to work for me.
Right. Don't accept it until you know. Yeah, take your time.
Right. Because from a birth mother's perspective, she's pregnant with her baby. She is giving the ultimate level of trust on her part. She's the one who is placing her baby with a family. And the feeling and sense of rejection that can create for a birth mother is extreme. I've seen birth mothers at that point pull out of making an adoption plan and decide to parent.
Wow.
And again, they chose adoption for a reason. So that's going to be very difficult for her because whatever reason she came to the agency with didn't change because of this family backing out on her. And that is really, really, really intense and difficult for a birth mother. Again, I've seen birth mothers just completely fall to the ground crying. It's a sense of rejection because they're putting themselves out there. And so it's really important for adoptive families to really do some introspection on what is the best fit for their family. You know, if you are an adoptive family and you already have, let's say, 5 children and you want to adopt a 6th child, and, you know, sometimes with a family like that, maybe drug exposure, intense drug exposure for a newborn would change your entire lifestyle with the other 5 children you have. Or maybe it would enable you to have lots of hands to be there to help too. So it can be looked at as, you know, either way. But whatever that is, you really need to think about that as you're choosing your preferences for being matched in a
look in the long term. Like, how is this going to affect my life, my wife's life, my children, other children's lives, my family's life? So how is the long term going to look for you? So be honest with yourself.
Right. I will say that sometimes, and I think this is amazing, is, you know, we may have somebody who in their career, they were, you know, a speech pathologist, or they have, you know, an expertise in working with children who have a hearing impairment. And so when they come in and they say, no, I really want to be matched with a child with a hearing impairment, or I really want to be matched with, somebody who may have these, may have a disorder that I'm very familiar with and I have expertise in, and I'm comfortable with that. I love those matches. I have to say, I absolutely love those because they're very prepared. Again, when it's your child, it's different. But at the same time, they have the training and expertise to really be able to handle that type of situation.
That's interesting because, broadly speaking, we're saying don't narrow it down too much, but that's something that really narrows it down. You're looking for a specific thing that you are equipped to deal with. And I agree, it is beautiful, but it's almost the opposite of what we're saying generally.
Right. But in that situation, I would say, okay, so if that's really what you're looking for, then make sure every other door is open. You know what I mean? Make sure that you are open. Now, and we don't get this as much as we used to, but probably because we've talked about it so frequently with adoptive families, is we don't do gender preferences. 20 years ago when we were starting the agency, we would get a lot of calls where,
I want a boy or I want a girl. Right.
It was usually a girl because that's usually what people request. And as I've explained before, we don't do that. One, ultrasounds are not 100% accurate. And there have been, they're not common, but you think you're going in and you've got
surprises. Sure.
Yeah. And it's a boy. The other thing is that it really bottlenecked the program. Because again, that's 50% are girls and 50% are boys loosely. And so when you have an adoptive family that only wants one gender, that cuts immediately in half of even being able to present to a birth mother. So we do not do gender preferences. When you are biologically having a baby, you don't get to choose. There's things you can do that may help weigh in your favor, of getting a specific gender. However, in an adoption situation, that doesn't happen. But I think it's really important to understand that preferences come on both sides. So the adoptive family has preferences and the birth mother has preferences. Some birth mothers come into the agency and they choose whether they want an open, semi-open, or closed adoption. Some of them want a 2-parent family. Some of them don't have a preference, whether there's one parent or two. Some want a stay-at-home mom. Some of them want the family to reside in Arizona. Some of them want the family to have a huge extended family that will be close enough to, be there for the baby as the baby grows up. Some birth parents want somebody who's very, athletic in the family. Some of them want, siblings for their child. Some of them do not want siblings. Some of them want adopted siblings, so their child won't be the only adopted child. Other ones don't have a preference. So when you think about it, so the birth mother has her preferences, the adoptive families have their preferences. And so again, in order to present, we need to make sure that both parties are in cahoots.
As open as they possibly can be, sure.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway from today is to understand that the more barriers put up, the longer you may be waiting. If you are just starting the adoption process, do your research, see what is going to be the best fit for you and your family. Have those hard conversations, with your spouse about, are you open to drug use? If you are there certain drugs that you're not open to? Are you open to communication? Are you open to visits? Are you open to Skype calls? Are you open to maintaining a pretty strong relationship after the baby's born? What works for your family and what doesn't work? I remember a family that we worked with, and they had adopted previously, and they had a closed adoption, which are very uncommon now, but they had a closed adoption with their oldest daughter. And then they adopted again, and they were open to an open or a closed or semi-open. They were open to any type of communication. And they were worried about the impact that would have on their oldest child. But again, they were open to it. And so these are, like I said, these are conversations that are so important to have. I also would recommend talking with your adoption professional if you hit any like road bumps. If you're trying to fill out your preference sheet and you have questions, this isn't a decision that you should rush on. This is something that you really need to take your time and really think about, because again, like you said, this is at minimum 18 years that you are making a decision about. And it's actually really the rest of your life.
Okay, now I have a question on the other side of it. And I think I know the answer, but I'm not positive. Obviously, they both have to look at what they are willing to accept in the future. But now looking at the birth mother side, have you ever seen somebody who is willing to adopt but has closed so many windows that there's no matches for them? Has that ever happened?
Not that I can think of just off the top of my head. I do know of situations where families waited a very, very, very long time. Mm-hmm. Often what I find is that families that are, that have waited when I say a long time, I'm saying over a year plus, they will then start opening their preferences more at that point, because their goal is to become a family, to be parents. It's almost like what is the most important thing to you? If you have waited, let's say 2 years, which is very long to wait. If you have waited 2 years and you have all these doors closed, so your preferences are very, very, very slim as to what you will accept. Will it eventually happen? Yeah, maybe. But if you were to open, say, one door, mm-hmm. like let's say you have very, very strict preferences, and one of them is you only want to close adoption. Well, closed adoptions are so rare at this point.
Nowadays.
I mean, we may go a year or two and not even see one. They're very uncommon. Maybe at that point, you and your spouse can go and talk with a counselor and see if there's things that you can do to help you being comfortable to open that door and increase your probability of being chosen by a birth mother. So I think there are certain things that you can do. Another one may be, if you were completely closed to any type of drug use, maybe go and speak with a specialist, a pediatrician, and get information from them about what they're seeing, on their day-to-day practice, and see if there's any drug exposure that you would be open to having. I think that there are things that you can do to make yourself comfortable and hopefully open some of those doors so that you're not waiting so long.
I was more asking about from the birth mother's perspective. So now, granted, there aren't as many windows to close from that perspective. It's, you want a couple, or you want a single parent, or a homosexual couple, or whatever it is. There aren't as many of those windows to close. I was just wondering if you've ever seen a birth mother not be able to place because of her preferences. Does that make sense to you at all?
It does. I'm going through my mental Rolodex.
Because I would imagine there's such an abundance of people willing and wanting to adopt that just doesn't happen. Somebody is going to meet the criteria.
I can't think off the top of my head of one. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a situation. I'm sure they're out there. I know that if within our agency, if we have our adoptive family pool, I will say, if we don't have what a birth mother is looking for, then we reach out. We have contacts throughout the United States to where we can try to help them find what they're looking for. And then that family would come to our agency. So we're usually able to accommodate. And again, if we don't have what they're looking for, the type of family in our agency, then we will usually be able to bring them in. Sure. From either another agency or attorney that is out of state or with another agency. I think the real important thing is to remember is that at the end of the day, you're adopting because you want to be a mom or a dad. You want to have a family, and you're looking to grow your family. And so that's got to be the top. That's got to be, the roof of the house. That's got to be the most important thing. So as long as if that is the top, and then you go from there, I think you will be able to find what works best for you and for your family, and just keep in mind the main goal. And the main goal is a successful adoption.
We have a pregnancy crisis hotline available 24/7 by phone or text at 623-695-4112, or you can reach us on our toll-free number 1-800-340-9665. We can make an immediate appointment with you to get you to a safe place, provide food and clothing, and help you get started on creating an Arizona adoption plan, or just give you more information. Check out our blogs on our website at azpregnancyhelp.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter by looking for AZ Adopt Podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to rate and review us on whatever platform you use to listen to us, and tell your friends about us. The Birth Mother Matters in Adoption podcast was written and produced by Kelly Rourke and edited by me. Thanks go out to Grapes for letting us use their song I Don't Know as our theme song. Join us next time on Birth Mother Matters in Adoption. For Kelly Rourke, I'm Ron Rains, and we'll see you then.